Based on your request, I'll create a simplified third-person narrative of the story without headings, keeping it under 900 words and making it engaging with simple English. James Williams drove home one autumn evening after working late at the courthouse. The streetlights had just turned on as the sky grew dark. He was thinking about his daughter Lucy, coming home from university, and the special dinner his wife, Emma, had planned. James noticed police lights flashing in his mirror. He pulled over, carefully, wondering what he might have done wrong. He always followed traffic rules. Officer Robert Thompson walked up to James's car with his hand near his gun. Thompson was new in Oakwood, having moved from another area just 3 months ago. At 35 years old, he had a name for being strict and making quick judgments. "License and registration," Thompson said roughly, not even saying hello. James reached slowly for his wallet. "Good evening, officer. Can I ask what I did wrong?" Thompson narrowed his eyes. "Your taillight is broken, and you were going 5 miles over the speed limit." James nodded politely. "I didn't know about the taillight. I'll fix it right away." He handed over his license and papers. "I'm Judge Williams from the county courthouse." Thompson looked at the license, then back at James like he didn't believe him. "Sure you are. Get out of the car, please." "Is that really needed?" Get out of the car now." Thompson's voice got louder. James opened the door carefully and stepped out, moving slowly. "Officer, there seems to be some mistake. I am Judge James Williams. You can call the courthouse to check." "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Thompson cut him off. "A man looking like you was reported breaking into a house 3 blocks from here." "That's impossible." "I've been at the courthouse all day," James said calmly. He had seen too many situations get worse, and he knew better than to argue too much. Thompson wasn't listening. "You can explain at the station." He roughly put handcuffs on James and pushed him toward the police car. As James sat in the back seat, he felt shocked, angry, and sad all at once. In all his years as a respected judge, nothing like this had ever happened to him. But he also knew that what was happening to him happened to others every day, people who didn't have his title or connections. "This is a mistake," he said quietly. "A serious mistake." At the police station, Sergeant William Baker was looking at reports when Officer Thompson arrived with James in handcuffs. Baker looked up and his face turned pale. "Judge Williams?" he asked in shock. "What's going on here?" Thompson froze. "Judge?" "This man said he was a judge, but I thought—" "You thought wrong," Baker snapped. "This is Judge James Williams. He's handled half the cases in this county for 15 years. He quickly took the handcuffs off James. "Judge, I'm so sorry for this terrible mistake." James rubbed his wrists but kept his dignity despite feeling humiliated. "Sergeant Baker, we need to talk about Officer Thompson's behavior." Baker nodded seriously. "Absolutely, Judge. Please come to my office, and Thompson, wait here." In Baker's office, James explained everything that happened. Baker looked more and more troubled as he heard the details. "Judge Williams, this is not how our officers are trained to act." "Officer Thompson is new, but that's no excuse." James sat thinking for a moment. "I could make a formal complaint, I could tell the media, but I don't think that would fix the real problem." He leaned forward. "What if we tried something different?" Baker looked surprised. "What do you have in mind?" "I'd like to meet with Officer Thompson, not to punish him, but to talk with him. Person to person." The sergeant was shocked. "After how he treated you, why would you want to do that?" James smiled gently. "Because change doesn't come from punishment alone. It comes from understanding." The next morning, in a small meeting room at the courthouse, James waited for Officer Thompson. He had thought carefully about what he wanted to say. This wasn't about getting back at him or making him look bad. It was about creating a moment that might lead to real change. Thompson came into the room looking nervous in his uniform. His eyes couldn't meet James's. "Please sit down," James said kindly. "Judge Williams, I want to say sorry for how I acted yesterday," Thompson began. "There's no excuse for how I treated you," James nodded. "I appreciate that, but I didn't ask. You here just to hear an apology. I wanted to ask you something." He paused. "Before you saw my license, what did you see when you looked at me?" Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," James replied gently, "and I think it's important that we both say it." For the first time, Thompson looked directly at James. I saw someone who didn't belong in that neighborhood driving that car. And why is that? The room got quiet as Thompson struggled with his answer. Finally, he admitted what they both knew, that he had made judgments based only on how James looked. Those judgments are dangerous, James said quietly, not just to me, but to our whole community. 3 days after the meeting at the courthouse, James invited Robert to visit the community center where he volunteered. Robert felt nervous walking into the building. Children played basketball in one corner, while adults talked in small groups around tables. An older woman approached them with a warm smile. "Judge Williams, so good to see you today." "Mary, this is Officer Robert Thompson. He'll be joining us on Thursdays for a while," James explained. Mary's smile faded slightly, but she nodded. "Welcome, officer." As they walked through the center, James greeted everyone by name. Robert noticed how people's faces lit up when they saw the judge, and how their expressions changed when they noticed him in uniform. "They don't trust me," Robert said quietly. "Trust takes time," James replied. "It's built one interaction at a time." In the back room, a group of teenagers sat in a circle. When James and Robert entered, the conversation stopped. "Everyone, this is Officer Thompson," James said. "He's here to listen and learn." A boy named Marcus spoke first. "Why? So he can arrest us later?" The room grew tense. Robert felt his face grow hot. "No," James answered calmly, "so that when you see each other on the street, you'll see a person first, not just a uniform or a stereotype." Robert sat awkwardly as the teens shared stories about their encounters with police. Some were frightening, some were humiliating. All were eye-opening. One girl named Lisa told about being followed around a store by security guards. "They watched me like I was going to steal something, but ignored my white friends completely." A boy named Derek described being stopped while riding his bike. The officer asked whose bike I was riding, like I stole it or something. Robert listened without defending or explaining. For the first time, he heard these stories not as complaints, but as lived experiences. After the session, James walked Robert to his car. "That was uncomfortable," Robert admitted. "Growth usually is," James replied. The next week, Robert returned to the center alone. The teenagers seemed surprised to see him. "I thought you'd be gone after one day," Marcus said. Robert shook his head. "I made a promise to listen. I'm keeping it." Over the next month, Robert became a regular at the center. He helped with homework, played basketball with the kids, and most importantly, he listened. He learned about the challenges the community faced: poor school funding, few job opportunities, and constant police presence that felt more threatening than protective. At the police station, things were changing too. Robert started speaking up during meetings. "We need to rethink how we patrol Oak Street," he said one day. "Our heavy presence there is creating tension, not safety." Some officers rolled their eyes, but Sergeant Baker was listening. "What do you suggest?" Baker asked. "Walking beats instead of driving through, getting to know the residents, building relationships before there's trouble." Baker looked thoughtful. "Bring me a proper proposal." Robert stayed late that night, drafting his ideas. As he worked, Officer David Wilson stopped by his desk. "Heard you've been hanging out with the judge," David said with a smirk. "I have," Robert replied without looking up. "Going soft on crime now?" Robert finally looked up. "No, just trying to be smart about prevention." David leaned against the desk. "Been on the force 20 years. Trust me, those people don't change." "Those people?" Robert asked. "You mean citizens? The ones we're supposed to protect?" David walked away without answering. 2 months after the arrest incident, Robert was on patrol when he saw a familiar face, Marcus from the community center running down the street. Another officer had already pulled over and was getting out of his car. Robert parked quickly and jogged over. "Everything okay here?" The other officer, Bill Harris, nodded. "Just checking out a suspicious person running." Marcus looked relieved to see Robert. "I'm late for work." "My boss will fire me if I'm not there in 5 minutes." Before Harris could respond, Robert said, "I know Marcus. He works at the grocery store on Elm." Harris looked between them, confused. "You know this kid?" "Yes," Robert said firmly. "And he needs to get to work." After Marcus hurried away, Harris gave Robert a strange look. "Since when do you know people from this neighborhood by name?" Robert smiled slightly. Things change. That evening, Robert stopped by the courthouse as James was leaving. "Something happened today," Robert said, and told him about Marcus. James nodded. "Small moments. That's where change happens." "It's not enough," Robert said. "No," James agreed, "but it's a start." The end. 2 months into the program, Robert found himself at the community center on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Children rushed around playing games while teenagers worked on homework at tables in the corner. This place that had once felt strange, to him now felt familiar. "Officer Thompson, can you help me with my math?" called Lily, a 10-year-old with bright beads in her hair. Robert smiled and sat down beside her. "Let's see what we've got here." As they worked through fractions, Mary Thompson, the elderly neighborhood organizer, watched from across the room. She remembered how tense everyone had been when Robert first started coming to the center. Now children called to him when he arrived. "You're good with them," Mary said when Lily went to get a snack. Robert looked up. "They make it easy, they don't judge." "Adults have more reasons to be careful," Mary replied. She sat down across from him. "My husband was beaten by police in 1965 for sitting at a lunch counter. He never trusted an officer again, right up until he died last year." Robert didn't know what to say. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," Mary continued. "I'm telling you because change takes generations. What you're doing matters, even if not everyone shows it." Later that day, James and Robert walked through the neighborhood. People nodded at James, but many still looked away when they saw Robert's uniform. "It feels like nothing's changing," Robert said. "Look closer," James replied. He pointed to a group of boys playing basketball. One of them waved at Robert. "That's Marcus. Last month he wouldn't even look at you." Robert nodded. "Small steps." Exactly. At the police station, things were different too. Some officers avoided Robert, calling him Judge's pet behind his back. Others were curious about his time in the community. Officer William Reed caught up with Robert in the parking lot one evening. "Heard you're spending time at the community center," Reed said. Robert nodded, expecting criticism. "My sister lives in that neighborhood," Reed continued. "Says people there are talking about your program." "Good things or bad things?" Robert asked. Reed shrugged. "Surprise things mostly, some good." "Want to join me sometime?" Robert offered. Reed looked uncertain but didn't say no. The following week, Chief Parker called a meeting. Robert was surprised to find himself invited. "Officer Thompson, I'd like you to tell everyone about your experience with Judge Williams' program." Robert looked around the room at his fellow officers. Some looked interested, others skeptical. "When I first started," he began, "I thought I was doing it as punishment, to avoid getting fired for arresting a judge." A few officers chuckled. "But something happened. I met people, real people with names and stories and lives, not just suspicious persons or potential threats." The room grew quiet. "There's Mike, who works night shifts and walks home at 2 a.m. We used to stop him regularly. And Lisa, who takes care of her 5 younger siblings since their mom died. And Peter, who's the first in his family to go to college." Robert paused, collecting his thoughts. "I realized I'd been policing streets, not protecting people. There's a difference." After the meeting, Chief Parker pulled Robert aside. "I've been watching your work, both here and in the community. I'd like to expand the program." Robert's eyes widened. "Really?" Parker nodded. "We need 5 more officers to volunteer. Think you can help recruit them?" That weekend, Robert sat in Judge Williams's courtroom, watching proceedings. He noticed how James spoke to everyone, from lawyers in expensive suits to defendants in handcuffs, with the same level of respect. During a break, James joined Robert in the hallway. "What are you thinking?" James asked. "I'm thinking about power," Robert replied. "In my uniform with my badge and gun, I have so much power over people's lives. One decision, to stop someone, to arrest them, to believe them or not, can change everything." James nodded. "With great power comes great responsibility," Robert smiled. "Did you just quote Spider-Man to me?" "Truth is truth, no matter the source," James said with a laugh. On Monday morning, Robert stood in the briefing room before his shift. 5 officers had expressed interest in joining the program. "What exactly do we do there?" asked Officer Sarah. Jenkins, you listen, Robert said. You learn names. You see people as people first, not suspects. Officer Tom Miller frowned. Sounds like social work, not police work. It's both, Robert said. How can we protect people we don't understand? 3 officers ultimately signed up. It wasn't everyone, but it was a start. That evening, Robert pulled over a car for speeding. As he approached the vehicle, he noticed the driver was nervous. "Good evening, sir," Robert said. "Do you know why I stopped you?" "No, officer," the man replied, his hands tight on the steering wheel. "You were going 15 over the limit," Robert explained calmly. "May I see your license and registration?" The man's hands shook as he handed over his documents. "Mr. Bennett," Robert said, reading the license, "I'm going to write you a warning today. Please slow down, especially in this neighborhood. There are kids playing." The relief on the man's face was immediate. "Thank you, officer. I will." As Robert walked back to his patrol car, he realized something had changed within him. 3 months ago, he might have seen the man's nervousness as suspicious. Now he saw it as human. The end Sunday dinner at the Thompson house was always loud. Robert's parents, his 2 brothers, and their wives, plus 5 children running around, made for a busy evening. Robert loved these gatherings, but lately they had become tense. "So you're still doing that community program?" Robert's brother Mark asked as they set the table. 4 months now, Robert replied. "Dad says you're wasting your time," Mark continued. "Says criminals don't change just because you're nice to them." Robert put down the plates. "They're not criminals, Mark. They're people. Some good, some bad. Most just trying to get by like everyone else." Mark shook his head. "You sound like you've joined a cult or something." Their mother called everyone to dinner. As they ate, talk turned to local news. "Did you hear about those teenagers arrested?" "For breaking into cars?" their father asked. "They need to lock them up and throw away the key." Before, Robert might have nodded along. Now he asked, "Did you know the community center lost its funding for after-school programs last month? Those kids have nowhere to go after school until their parents get home from work." His father frowned. "So that makes stealing okay?" "No," Robert said calmly, "but understanding why things happen helps us prevent them, not just punish them after." The table fell silent. Then Robert's nephew Jake, only 8 years old, asked, "Uncle Robert, do you arrest bad guys?" Robert smiled. "Sometimes, but mostly I try to help people before they do bad things." "That's boring," Jake complained. "Actually," Robert said, "it's the most interesting part of my job." After dinner, Robert's mother found him alone in the kitchen. "You've changed," she said. Robert nodded. "Is that bad?" She touched his cheek gently. "No, you seem more at peace." The next morning, Robert arrived at the police academy with Judge Williams. They had been invited to speak to new recruits about community policing. Robert felt nervous, as 50 young faces looked up at them. "5 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my career," Robert began. "I arrested Judge Williams here because of how he looked, not because of anything he did wrong." The room was silent. "I could have lost my job. Instead, I gained a new perspective." Robert told them about his time at the community center, about Mary, who organized neighborhood watches despite being 80 years old, about Kevin, who worked 3 jobs to put his daughter through college, about children who were now more likely to wave at police cars than run from them. "Your job isn't to make arrests," Robert told the recruits. "It's to keep people safe. Sometimes that means arresting someone. More often it means preventing problems before they start." After the talk, a young recruit approached Robert. "Sir, I'm from a neighborhood like the one you described. Growing up, I was always afraid of police." "What changed?" Robert asked. "One officer," the recruit said. "She knew all our names, played basketball with us sometimes. When I got in trouble once, she talked to me instead of arresting me. That's why I'm here now." Robert nodded. One person can make a difference. That afternoon, Robert responded to a call about a fight at the local high school. When he arrived, he found 2 boys being held in separate classrooms. Both had bloody noses and torn shirts. In the past, Robert might have arrested both for disturbing the peace. Now he sat down with each boy separately. The first, Michael, explained, "He's been bullying my little brother for weeks, taking his lunch, Marnie pushing him around." The second boy, Jason, looked down when Robert entered. "You going to arrest me?" "Should I?" Robert asked. Jason shrugged. "Probably. I hit him first." "Why?" The boy didn't answer at first. Robert waited patiently. "My dad lost his job," Jason finally said. "We don't have enough food. I was taking the money for groceries." Instead of arrests, Robert arranged a meeting with both boys and their parents. He connected Jason's family with a food bank and a job program. He had Michael's brother move to a different lunch period. "Is this really police work?" asked the school principal, watching Robert set up these solutions. "It is now," Robert replied. That evening, Robert met Judge Williams for coffee. "I spoke to my brother Mark today," Robert said. "He thinks I've gone soft." James smiled. "What do you think?" "I think I'm seeing more clearly. Before, everything looked like a nail because all I had was a hammer. Now I have more tools." They sat quietly for a moment. "There's still so much to fix," Robert said. "Yes," James agreed, "but we're moving in the right direction." As they talked, a young woman approached their table. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "Are you Officer Thompson?" Robert nodded, surprised. "You helped my brother, Jason, yesterday, the school fight." "Is he okay?" Robert asked. "He's good. My dad got an interview from that job program you told us about. I just wanted to say thank you for not arresting Jason. He's a good kid who made a mistake." After she left, James smiled. "Small moments, remember?" "Small moments," Robert agreed. Outside the coffee shop, Robert noticed an elderly man struggling with grocery bags. Without thinking, he went to help. The man initially looked frightened when he saw the uniform, then grateful for the assistance. As Robert walked back to his car, his radio crackled with another call. He took a deep breath before answering. Each call was an opportunity, not just to enforce the law, but to strengthen the community he had sworn to protect. The end on. The morning of the town hall meeting, James woke up earlier than usual. He sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise. 6 months had passed since that night when Robert Thompson had put handcuffs on him. 6 months that had changed everything. Emma joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the morning chill. "Nervous about tonight?" she asked. "A little," James admitted. "This program means a lot to me. I want people to see its value." Emma squeezed his hand. "They will." Across town, Robert was also awake early. He ironed his uniform with special care, making sure every crease was perfect. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Mark. "Good luck tonight. Dad and I might come." Robert smiled. Small steps. By evening, the community center was more crowded than anyone had expected. People stood along the walls and sat on the floor when the chairs ran out. Local news cameras were set up in the back of the room. Michael Ross, a 10-year-old boy who attended the center's after-school program, tugged on Robert's sleeve. "Officer Thompson, can I sit with you?" Robert smiled. "I have to be up front, buddy." "But I saved you a seat in the first row." Michael beamed. 6 months ago, he would have hidden behind his mother at the sight of a police officer. Chief Parker opened the meeting with facts and figures. Crime was down, trust was up, but numbers only told part of the story. When James stood to speak, the room fell silent. 6 months ago, I could have filed a lawsuit," he said simply. "Instead, I asked for conversation. That conversation became a program, and that program is now changing our community." James looked around the room, meeting people's eyes. Change isn't easy. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. He motioned to Robert, who took his place at the microphone. Robert looked nervous but determined. "I was wrong that night," he said, "and I had a choice afterward, to defend my mistake or learn from it. Thanks to Judge Williams, I chose to learn." As Robert spoke, his eyes found Michael in the front row, giving him a thumbs up. He found Mary Thompson, nodding along with his words. He found his fellow officers, some proud, some still uncertain. "Being a good police officer isn't about power," Robert continued. "It's about service. You can't serve people you don't understand." When Robert finished speaking, Lisa Johnson from the Neighborhood Association stood up. "I want to share something," she said. "Last week, my son was walking home at night when a police car pulled up. Before this program, my heart would have stopped with fear. But the officer just asked if he needed a ride because it was raining. My son got in the car. They talked about basketball. The officer knew his name. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what that means to a mother like me." One by one, others shared their stories. Not all were positive. There were still problems to solve, trust to build. Marcus, now 17, spoke about still being stopped by officers who didn't know him. "But now, when it happens," he said, "I know. I can call Officer Thompson, and he listens." David Wilson, the veteran officer who had been so skeptical at first, surprised everyone by speaking. "I've been wrong," he said simply. "For 20 years I've been policing this neighborhood without seeing it, without seeing you. I'm sorry for that." The room was silent for a moment, then filled with applause. After the official meeting ended, people stayed to talk. Officers and residents stood in small groups, sharing stories, making plans. A reporter interviewed Michael about what it was like to have police officers help with homework at the center. "They're just regular people," Michael said, "but with cool cars." In one corner, Robert's father stood awkwardly, watching his son talk with a group of teenagers. James approached him. "You must be proud of your son." "I'm trying to understand it all," Mr. Thompson admitted. "Policing looks different than in my day." "Better different, I hope," James said. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "I think so." Outside the center, the spring evening was warm and clear. People spilled out onto the lawn, continuing their conversations. Under the stars, James found Robert sitting alone on a bench. "What are you thinking?" James asked, sitting beside him. "I'm thinking about that night," Robert replied. "How different things could have been. If I had filed a complaint, or if I had kept defending my mistake." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "We still have so much work to do," Robert said. James nodded. "Change is never finished. But look around." Children played tag on the lawn. Officers chatted with community members. An elderly woman was getting a ride home from a young police officer. "This is real change," James said quietly. "Person by person, moment by moment." As they watched, Chief Parker approached with the mayor and a visitor in an expensive suit. "Judge Williams, Officer Thompson," the chief said. "This is Director Collins from the State Police Academy. He's interested in expanding your program statewide." Robert and James exchanged a look of surprise. "We'd be happy to discuss it," James said. "We've made plenty of mistakes along the way," Robert added honestly, "but we've learned from each one." Later that night, as the crowd finally thinned, Robert helped stack chairs while James turned off lights. "Did you ever imagine this?" Robert asked. "That night when I put handcuffs on you," James shook his head. "Never. But that's how change works. Here it starts in unexpected places." Outside, the stars shone bright over Oakwood. The town wasn't perfect, the work wasn't finished, but something important had begun, something that started with a mistake and grew into understanding, and in the quiet of that spring night, both men knew that their journey together had only just begun. The end.